Yo, YouTube. All right, now here is episode 5 of Halo TV series. And for friggin' God's sake, we finally get a battle scene again. So, and it's freaking off the hook. Arguably the other, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes of the show, I don't even give a crap. Because that battle scene was friggin' epic. So let's get right into it right away with the battle scene. First off, I think we finally get to see grunts, jackals, and only like a handful of elites, and even we even get a brute, which is friggin' awesome. So here we get the jackals with the shields, which is, you know, right on point. We have the grunts, who look a lot more menacing, arguably, which is fine. You know, they're using the plasma pistols. We have needlers, and it was just an epic battle scene. You know, there'll be some things I kind of nitpick through, which is whatever. You know, it's not like a huge deal, but just little things like, you know, where basically all the Marines are like cannon fodder, and the only one doing a big difference, arguably, are you know, silver team, the Spartans, right? Like Kai, Vanek, and whatever the third person is. And I mean, there's a few guys who get off a few kills with like the Gatling guns, but for the most part, it was basically the Spartans doing the majority of the work. But it was great seeing this huge battle. You know, they come down in these like drop pods, which is definitely from the game as well. So it was nice. Like, I think this is where all the money is going. Like episode 1, the first battle, and then like episode 5, this battle. Like, is it every other pretty much every other episode, it's like low budget as F. And then the weird thing though, one thing that was super dope was this scene right here, where we basically see how, like, finally, like a needler and like the effects of the needler. You know, this guy gets like punctured by a few needles, like 4 or 5 needles, and then he explodes into like basically mist, like what you see the aftermath here. I was like, oh, like that is freaking crazy. Exactly what happens. You know, they have a few kind of Easter eggs, I guess you can say, to the game, where like this guy gets kicked out of the warthog, and then by grunt of all people, which can happen, and then Chief kicks him out, kicks out the grunt, and then he starts driving. This part was kind of cool, where it's like, oh hey, like Silver Team, get in the car or get in the warthog, and they're just like running alongside him like freaking Flash. And they can run fast, obviously, because they're Spartans. I'm not sure if that was ever a thing, arguably, but I guess it is in here. So they get on and they just start like hammering out the Covenant, like they're, you know, like shooting fish in a barrel. And yeah, that was like, these were great battle scenes. They even have a Covenant dropship. I don't remember what it's called, but you know, they have like a freaking high other like kind of warships going on, and it's really good stuff. Like here we have one thing that's a little different here, like I thought it was kind of interesting, is here we have the inside of Kai's helmet. So we have the shield bar up here, which is different from what you see in Chief. You have the radar on the bottom left side, which you see like alive, you know, the white dots being the allies and how many there are left, and then the red dots being the enemy. So looks like not that many people died, but then again, you never know. Which is also kind of weird, because like if you think about it, this person is still alive, you know, granted about to die. So this person should be registering on the radar, like as a, like right on top of where Kai is, but not. So this is like super nitpicky, but you know, like I'm just saying, I just noticed it now. But I like how they added a bunch of other stuff for this. Like they added like a bunch of distance meters. You know, they added like all these like little kind of like almost like what you would see in like a airplane or like a fighter jet HUD. Like you can kind of see like elevation readings here, which I kind of like. You know, they definitely added the compass type situation going on here. They have a zoom of like 2.5565. Pretty exact. She has 2 grenades, and then clearly holding a sniper rifle with, I'm assuming these are ammo readouts. Not really sure what they are. It just says linked under each of them, so. But I definitely like these like more enhanced type of kind of HUDs for these for the Spartans, which is shield status, capacitor, armor, something, Mjolnir, blah 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 blah. So yeah, there's a lot more readouts, comms open. Like I kind of like these these little tidbits that they threw up on here, which is actually a little bit more nice. What else? Kai goes through some kind of weird episode because now she feels all her feelings or whatever. And then we get this really dope scene of where Chief not commandeers, but like rides a freaking banshee and eventually steers the sucker into the Covenant dropship here and just explodes it. And I was like, what the crap? Like, you can't do that in the game, but it's a cool scene, like, nonetheless. Some little nitpicky things is like you see here, the jackals have the plasma swords, which is not a thing. They only elites fought with swords because that was like kind of their part of their culture. They're just like, they're more about hand-to-hand war. I mean, they use guns, but they also do a lot of hand-to-hand combat as well. If you ever watch the Halo Legends series, it was like there's like these super cool scenes or these stories of like elites, and they kind of fantasize them in this almost like ancient Japan type of ritual where they're like samurai, but they're obviously elites. They even wear some like the clothing is even like almost like Asian Japanese influence. It was really cool. That was like really one of the better shorts. And then eventually, so that whole thing explodes, and all you see is just Chief like rising up out of the ashes, like, what you gonna do now, Covenant? Like, that was like super dope scene. And he also eventually goes ham on and then he just goes nuts on all like the surviving Covenant, like all the jackals. See, like these were never part of the jackals repertoire of gun or like weapons, but whatever. He just destroys them with a shotgun, which is I kind of wish they could add a little bit more to it, like show him reloading in first person mode or something. I don't know, like, that's just me, but might have taken away from the badassness of the scene. But yeah, he just starts like pretty much tearing out this entire group. We see his HUD. He has the plasma pistol, which registers how much energy is left, which is clearly none. He has 0 grenades. Yeah, his shield is a little different. It's like more slanted, like the pyramid in the middle, but he still gets the readouts normal. So like most of it's actually pretty similar to what we saw in Kai's HUD, though these are a little bit wider for whatever reason for those like kind of elevation measurements. Again, we have these numbers, don't know what they are, but they're different for Chief. 28, 125, 134, whatever that is about. But still cool. Still pretty interesting in terms of, I like this on the bottom. That kind of gives you like an idea of like how far, like kind of more like a distance type reader going on here. And the crosshairs straight on the elite here that's dropped in with them. And then he pummels the crap out of the elite. Super cool scene, and he just goes nuts, and he's just covered in elite blood, like just like ugh. And his arm, like his freaking fist is just dripping with elite blood. It's crazy. But in the end, I guess technically they lose the battle in a way. They survive because obviously before I talk about that, we get the brute that drops down with well, not a quite the gravity hammer or the hammer that most brutes use, but it's still like a good giant hammer club thing going on. And yeah, this brute looks pretty menacing. Like he has armor on, doesn't even have a helmet on. He's just like, what? Like, I don't know if they'll give him a name like Atriox, but Atriox is a completely different story. Not even a part of the Covenant at this point. But just seeing the brute is just super cool, and just awesome. Like, I wish he almost dropped earlier, where he's just like swinging the freaking hammer around and just beating the crap out of everybody. But no, we do see him a little bit, but he's kind of a short-lived moment. But overall, not overall, but these are like basically the good stuff. Little nitpicky here, where he's holding a battle rifle, and then he starts shooting at the ship, and he goes full auto, which is not a thing. These battle rifles are 3-shot bursts, so small nitpick thing here. But you do see here, in terms of his radar, no enemies, no allies left. So pretty normal there. But then, so those are the good stuff. And then, but that was like the only good part. Like these 10 to 13 minutes of battle was like the only good thing about this entire episode. Like everything else, like honestly, like did not care about. Again, going back to the whole Quan Ha storyline, like honestly, this episode like went nowhere with whatever the story was here, and also made me hate the character even more. Like if there's any weak point in this whole story, it's the Quan Ha storyline, because it makes no sense, like in terms of like her priorities. Like her one line, or like her few lines in this episode was just like I'm gonna free Madrigal no matter what. I'm like, okay, let's just say you free your home planet from the UNSC. Oh, guess what? There's a murderous alien race, or covenant of races, where there's at least 3 to 4 different races trying to murder all of humanity. How are you gonna fight them when you literally just saw your entire village of rebels get wiped out like they were nothing? Like, what makes you think like you can fight them without the UNSC? Granted, she's a kid, she doesn't get it, of like what like she needs to, like why like she would need to pair herself up, or like ally herself with the UNSC to fight these. But like it's just like she's so like her character's head is so far up her character's butt that like she just doesn't get it. Only Soren is like, we gotta get the hell out of here. I feel like the one thing they could have done to make her character story arc a little bit more interesting was like, okay, she goes back to Madrigal for the same reasons of like, oh, I want to free my planet or whatever. But instead, she discovers something that can help them in the Covenant fight, or maybe like the rest of the planet's still like, we want like independence, because like, they don't know about the Covenant really, because only that village was destroyed. And she has to convince the rest of the planet, be like, we gotta go fight. Like, we gotta go fight these Covenant crazy alien people, because they just wiped out my dad and our entire, plant village people. Like, we gotta go do something. Like, that should have been her story arc. Like, trying to get more people, and maybe there's like some kind of, secret weapon that's on Madrigal or something. But as of right now, her character arc is just friggin' annoying. One thing I do want to mention that I didn't talk about in my last video that I forgot about was Soren's gun. The hand, which basically looks like a very much, maybe it's an Easter egg to Destiny, who is made by Bungie, the original creators of Halo, and I think maybe is a nod to the Bungie team, and because it looks exactly like a hand cannon, or at least a hand cannon from Destiny. So I wonder if this is kind of like a nod to it, because that gun is definitely not in the Halo universe. Like, it's just that doesn't exist, as far as I know, in the Halo universe. So I thought that was kind of interesting in terms of how they deal, or how or his weapons anyways, because he's not using UNSC weapons. See other things in this that like wasn't really whatever's, the whole I thought this was kind of cool. This kind of drone thing that they throw up in this episode, I was like, that's new. That's not in the games as far as I know. So having this around is kind of nice, or it was kind of like it was a good way to explain how they get aerial shots of the battle as it was going on, because they'll just use the drone as if like, oh yeah, this sucker's just flying around and like, has a camera on it. So it was kind of a nice touch of them adding towards it. And then honestly didn't really give a crap about the whole, don't care about Maki or whatever the hell crap her name is, and her shenanigans. And then the whole scene where Chief, grabs the artifact, and then finally figures out that like, oh, he was kidnapped as a child, which is kind of, I guess this is how they're going to introduce of how Spartans are made. So if you're not familiar with the lore, Spartans were Halsey basically chose a bunch of children who had a certain genetic kind of makeup that made these kids a little bit more extraordinary. Like, I guess they can predict like these kids are a little smarter, going to be a little stronger. They're going to be able to likely withstand all the augmentations or whatever. So they found all these kids, kidnapped them, and replaced them with clones. With they kind of go into a little bit here. You see John being kidnapped, and then there's a scene where he can tell like he was being replaced like with this other clone person here, and these clones eventually like they die off within like a month or two, and to the parents, they just figured like, oh, it's these kids just died, like they just suddenly just passed away like due to heart failure or whatever. So these kids don't last. And then as far as the parents are concerned, or like aware, the kids just die. They don't know that they've been kidnapped. And then the kids, they get thrown into the Spartan program. Now, in the original lore, these kids are well aware that I don't know if they weren't aware that they were kidnapped per se. I didn't read The Fall of Reach, but they kind of don't care. They kind of know that they were forcibly taken, because in one of the Halo Legends episodes, there was a Spartan candidate who tries to run away from the Spartan program and go back to her home, and then she finds the clone or whatever. So she knows she's been kidnapped. She tries to go back to it, but then decides to, I think it was like Daisy, I think that was her name. But she eventually goes back to the UNSC or whatever. So I don't know, but in this world, I guess they don't know they've been kidnapped, which is also kind of like, well, where the hell did you think you came from? The thing with the Spartans is that they were perfectly fine with being a part. They were constantly told like, you're special, like you're gonna save humanity. So you brainwash the kids to be like, okay, I'm special and I'm gonna save humanity. That's why I'm okay with being training and seeing my friends die and all this craziness. Like that was, they were told like they were special, or like they were just like these like unique children, and that they were gonna be like the saviors of humanity, which is how they kind of convinced the children that to stay essentially. So this whole like kind of like scenario where Master Chief gets super pissed at Halsey and tries to attack her because like he eventually finds out like, oh, like you kidnapped me and now I hate you type of situation is just, I don't know. I feel like I guess you got to introduce that whole backstory in some shape or form, and I guess they chose this way to do it, which I don't agree with, but it is what it is. And yeah, basically that's kind of the whole thing. This whole Soren Kwanha story goes nowhere. They're just in this desert and nothing happens. And then the Covenant attacks, and basically I could care less about the rest of the episode because the battle itself was just super dope. And then the Covenant eventually takes the other part of the Keystone, and then Maquis drops down, I guess, like to pretend to be another kind of damsel in distress type of situation. And I guess like her job is to recover the other part of the Keystone. So we'll see what happens after this. I don't think she'll have the Magdra or whatever those worms with her this time, so we'll see what happens there. But I guess she's supposed to play some kind of part in the next, where she's gonna eventually like she gets to go face to face with the demon, the Master Chief himself. And so we'll see what happens in the next, I guess, 4 episodes that are left. I think there's only 9. I'll double check on that. I'm not exactly sure. But yeah, pretty decent episode because of the battle. Another nitpicky thing here. This plasma pistol looks like a toy. Looks so plasticky. It kills me. But whatever. Anyways, that's the episode that's my review of episode 5 of Halo. Let me know what you guys think of it in the comments if you've seen it. If you haven't, please go watch it. At least just watch the battle scene because it's freaking crazy. Thank you guys. Take it easy. We'll talk next week for episode 6.